How did I get into inventing things? Oh, that's an easy one. My father was an inventor, and after the war, from the age of 9, I used to come into his workshop and see him making practical embodiments of his invention of thermostats. And to see a piece of metal, you could breathe on it and see it move, was amazing for a small boy. And I just thought everybody had fathers who invented things, and it was taken as read that you invented things. And so I suppose I always expected to be an inventor. I can't imagine anything more fun than seeing an idea that you had perfected and made practical. Ideas are easy. The practical embodiment is the difficult bit. And changing it into a practical embodiment is the innovation of an invention. And it's the innovation which is just as important as the idea. But the fun is doing it yourself and building it and seeing it change the world. Well, the ones you can see probably are the outside of the kettle controls. Most of the other things are hidden away inside appliances like electric motors, to protect the electric motor, a cutout inside an electric motor, or a cutout inside a fan heater, a hairdryer, those sort of things. And you can't see those. Everybody doesn't even know that they're there. They just assume that they must have been there, or something works, and they don't think about it. It's the same with the kettle. What makes it switch off? And quite knowledgeable people have no idea what makes it switch off. It's a little bimetal switch which operates. The invention that my father had made was a snap-action bimetal blade which you could calibrate, and it actually had the current going through the bimetal. And I used one of his bimetals and miniaturized it so it was about as big as a fingernail. And when I made the first prototypes and showed them round, people would look at it and say, "Gee, that's small." And so I called it the Otter G. And we started to export it to Germany and all major motors, not only for low voltage, but for mains applications, Hoover washing machines, spin dryers, things like that as well. And so it was a huge market. And I left the company in the 70s, and it was still in production there. And even today, if you go onto the internet and look under Otter Controls, you can find that they're still making the same bimetal control, and it looks identical to the one I designed all those years ago. Well, some ideas take quite a long time to come to fruition, and whereas I'm a great exponent of never do anything that you can't do yourself, don't expect somebody else to do it. As you get a successful business, you can tackle harder and harder things to do, and you can lead the team, and you've already created the funds through the business, so that the fun then is leading the team to innovate and create the new application which you dreamt about. And the proudest moment is when you see the object in the shop and you look at it, you think, just as I thought it would be. Well, I suppose the first recognition was Queen's Award for Industry, which I proudly wear here. Strix won 4 of them over the years. The first 3 were for export achievement, because when Strix was starting, kettles were virtually unknown in Europe. The market for kettles in Europe, they didn't even know what they were. And yet there was a huge market in the UK. I didn't think that market was wrong, and it allowed us to have a go and establish the English kettle throughout Europe. As an inventor, you can never stop. Ideas are the easy bit. It's the practical embodiments that are difficult, and you've got to limit the number of things you try and tackle, or you never achieve anything. So at the moment, I'm loving designing and making chronophages, but on the back burner here, I've got a solar cooker which I want to work on, and another fun project which I would like to start, and that is to make a sundial that reads to a second of time, and so that you can actually watch the rotation of the Earth by seeing the shadow move in a sundial, which will read you to a second of time and see the rotation of the Earth. How long is a piece of string? It's a dream, and if you don't have dreams, nothing ever comes true. But if you do have a dream, then follow your dream. And if given good health and a future, then I hope that one day there'll be a sundial outside which will read to a second, and young children can look at it and see the Earth revolving. My advice to anybody is, don't set off to make anything, to design something that you can't make a prototype of yourself. And if you can make a prototype of it yourself, then it's possible to get it into production for a minimum cost. You don't have to be a rocket scientist or a nuclear physicist to change the world. There's so much junk sold in the world today that is not designed properly. How many motorway stations have you been in and gone and ordered a cup of tea, and they give you a teapot, and when you try and pour the tea out of the teapot, it pours onto the table? Now, we're in the 21st century. Teapots have been made for 5,000 years, and yet we're still put up with manufacturing things which are crap. It's a simple thing, but you've got to make something that works. And if you can make something that works, and it's new and it's different, and you can make a prototype, then you can start a business. And you don't have to borrow huge sums of money. You don't have to have an army of people to perfect your idea. Perfect it yourself. Why let somebody else have the fun of doing it? My father loved doing things with his hands and repairing and making things work, and he was often asked to get a grandfather clock going because nobody else could get it to go, and he'd often do funny things like boil it to get all the old oil out of the mechanism. It wasn't unusual to see him at the kitchen table with a grandfather clock in bits trying to get it to go, which always fascinated me. And I think it then moved on to navigation when I was trying to fly a little aeroplane from Manchester to Tokyo and going across Arctic Canada. The magnetic compass points north, but when you go over the North Magnetic Pole, it doesn't work at all, and you suddenly realise the problems of worldwide navigation, and that fascinated me, and I got very interested in learning how to do it properly. The first clock I had, I inherited was from my parents, and it was a Welsh grandfather clock made in about 1750, and that was a lovely clock. And one day I was in London, and there was a clock shop opposite Harrods, and if ever I was there I always used to go and look at it. And there in the window was a wonderful grandfather clock made by John Taylor. And I thought, wow. My father was a gliding instructor, and during the war, in the evenings and weekends, he gave his time to training boys to learn to fly. And I was just amazed, just hooked. And so I actually started training when I was age 14, and by that stage I was in King William's College, so I could only come in the holidays. And I then went solo when I was 16, and so it's exactly 60 years this year in August that I went solo. So I've been a pilot for 60 years. Part of the problem with places like Cambridge is that in this day and age, everybody's paying for their education, and they are very choosy as to what they got for it. But with my generation, all education was free. And I think most people then feel they have no obligation to put anything back, whereas I felt it was the opposite, that you should put something back, and particularly in this day and age when there's so little money going into universities from the government. And I started sponsoring undergraduates. And then the facilities in Corpus hadn't changed since I was an undergraduate. And so the undergraduate library was exactly the same as it always had been. I felt that the undergraduate library is the centre of the college. It's the whole purpose of having Cambridge colleges. And I was the senior sponsor to build the new undergraduate library. And to cut a long story short, in the end I said, why don't you have a clock there? And the fellow said, oh yes, a clock. Yes, good idea. Yes, we'll have a clock. So I said, I'll design you one. And so I was left with the challenge as an inventor of creating a new sort of clock, because who wants to make anything that anybody else has ever made before? I don't want just to make a clock. I want to make something which is fundamentally different. And I also keep ideas until they're useful in the back of my mind. And one of the ideas was anything you can do in a straight line, you can do in a circle. And I realized that you could make a different way of showing light coming through by using a vernier, which was a circular vernier, and have 61 slits against 60. And of course only will one slit line up, but if you move it very slightly, the next one unit lights up, and the next one, and the next one, and so it goes all the way around. When you move it from 0 to 1, every one of the others comes into line. And so I realized you could make time racing away, and so that became the idea for the face.
Hours, minutes and seconds.
And John Harrison is my hero, and he designed himself a wooden clock, and he had a grasshopper escapement in it, but not one person in 1,000 knows how it works. So I thought it would be great fun to turn that escapement inside out and put it into the clock to demonstrate the grasshopper escapement designed by John Harrison. And of course the other reason why I chose John Harrison is that he invented bimetal, and I'd spent all my life designing controls with bimetal in. So that was the two reasons I chose to design a clock which had connotations of John Harrison. And when you're approaching your 70, time isn't on your side, and so that I thought it'd be fun to have a chronophage which on every minute opens its jaws and on the 59th second went and ate the minute, and you could never get it back. So that's how the chronophage came about on the outside of the Corpus Library. One thing I've very much tried to do in my life is to have fun and to show that I'm having fun in teaching young people. And I've loved being a gliding instructor, teaching people to fly. I've loved being a sailing instructor, teaching people to sail. I've loved climbing. I've loved trying to teach people to climb. I've not been qualified to do the climbing, but I think life is quite short, and you've got to fulfill everything that you want when you can do it. So don't put off anything till tomorrow. Do it today. If somebody asks you, can you do something, don't think of all the reasons why you can't do it. Think of all the reasons why you will do it. And so I'd like to leave the legacy of inspiring people to have fun in life, to reach their own potential, and to find out what that potential is. How you make that a legacy, I don't know. But my motto is think the unthinkable. And because my mother was a Latin scholar, cogitate in cogitator. Think the unthinkable. And if you stop and think how you can change a difficulty into an advantage, then you can have a lot of fun. And again, how you inspire somebody to do that, you can only tell stories about where it's happened and inspire them to go on and do likewise.